combining two boards or combining two frames. Now this is in the interest of saving time. Is it ideal? No, because ideally I'd like to change the shot a little bit for the subsequent frame. This is about the push and pull that any cinematographer has to be able to give up on an actual film set, right? Part of what we do is managing time, right? So this is the caveat. This is the give up that I'm willing to do so that we can get the extra shot. We're combining two frames into one setup. I think that's something that we've all encountered in our careers. So our autofocus is really going to help us out. I was just telling Sony, the people at the Sony stage back there, I just tried their 16 to 35 G Master version 2, and that has a 5-inch near focus threshold. That means your subject could be this far away from the lens and still retain focus. Now that near focus is held up throughout the focal range, which means even in a 35mm focal length, you still have 5 inches of near focus, right? That is almost unbelievable with a cine lens. You'll get maybe 6 to 8 inches. 5 inches on a 35 is insane, and we'll play with that later. You guys have my presentation queued up? It's right there. It's going to be super simple. Like I said, I know we all want to jump into the actual practical part of this. So we're just going to talk about a couple of projects that I worked on with Sony systems, why Sony systems were chosen, how they helped me out, how they kicked my ass, and then I'm assuming most of you understood from work that camera, we're going to learn a couple of tips and tricks. I'm not going to go over that here, I'd rather go over that outside when we actually get to hold the cameras. Shall we? Again, any questions? Are you all still eating? Nobody? Nothing? Yes, sir. What camera did I use? It depends on the situation. On my last film, I had to use an Alexa Mini because it was a push and pull with the studio. So for me to be able to balance my budget and get an entire array of aperture lights and the lenses that I wanted, which were the Supreme Prime Radiances, I had to balance the budget. So, sorry? What do I prefer right now? I fucking love the Venice. I'm very excited about the Bernardo, but the caveat with the Venice and Sony systems, and I know the president is back there, so let's keep this between us, is that they tend to be sharper than what we prefer, especially for those who have a film background. So the challenge for cinematographers sometimes, if the project calls for it, is how do you take that edge off? And a lot of times you can do that in post, but why not save yourself a couple of hours? If you want to bake in that look, throw in a couple of filters. This goes against what Gab was saying earlier about having a matte box. Because for those of you who are videographers, a matte box makes your camera look a little bit more professional. And you can sometimes charge it a little bit more. And you can throw some filters on it. Okay, play out the slide. Super basic. Work that camera. My name is Noel Teehankee. Next slide, please. So, this was shot in 2022. I don't know how many people have actually seen this. It's okay. There are parts that are good. There are parts that are good. Some of the parts that aren't good, I didn't shoot. So that's not on me. Now, we shot this on a mixture of cameras, the FX9, FX6, and FX3. Why I want to bring this up specifically is because we use S-Log3, we're able to seamlessly mix and grade all three cameras together. Sometimes we would have isometric coverage using an FX6 and an FX3 at the same time. Right? So again, it's the versatility of the Sony systems that allow you to mix and match all cameras. Now, problem being sensor size, mitigating the rolling shutter of the FX3, but if you understand how to use your cameras, those become non-hindrances. How many people have actually seen this? I didn't think so. Next slide, please. How many people saw this? Absolutely nobody. So this is an MMF movie from 2022 where we decided to use the Venice 1. Now the Venice 2 has been available, but again, due to budgetary constraints, we had to dumb it down to the Venice 1. Still an awesome camera, even though it came out maybe, what, 5 years ago? I still believe it. Great camera. Dual ISO. I think on the Venice 1, you're dealing with 3200, which is a lifesaver. A lifesaver when you're chasing the sun. It's a lifesaver in a myriad of different situations. The only caveat to the Venice 1 is that it's a big camera. You stick that thing on the road and you will break your back. Next slide, please. All right, so this is actually one of my favorite movies that I've ever shot. It's GG, or Good Game. We submitted this to the MMFF this year. It did not get in. Primarily, I feel, because of the camera work and the judging committee, it's a little bit old. I don't think they understood exactly what the Philippines' first esports and gaming movie was really about. So I think this will be released first quarter 2024. I love this movie primarily because we use the Venice 1 and 2 with the Rialto systems. How many of you are familiar with the Rialto systems? Anybody? Please. Somebody raise their hand. Nobody. No? Really? Okay. So the Rialto system is a lens mount extension that comes from the body of your lens, right? Essentially, you take your lens mount and you can extend it just, what are we talking about, 10, 20 feet away from the camera itself, right? So this actually allowed us to use the Venice like a GoPro. We were able to rig a Venice in corners, in car mount situations. I was able to put it on a Ronin and survive for 12 to 14 hours a day. Jumping, running, whip panning, all of that, while retaining the sensor of a Venice 2. Next, please. Okay, so this was not shot. This was shot. Who's seen this, please? Okay, thank you guys. This was an Alexa Mini, sorry. That was our primary A cam. But a lot of the gimbal stuff and a lot of the BB C cam stuff was shot on an A7S3. Now, even me, I find it hard to spot what footage is actually in the Sony system. So, given the right exposure, the right grade, the right lookup table, I firmly believe that you can intercut Sony systems with camera systems like ours. Next, please. I'm getting thirsty. Okay, so 3 main points that I believe fuel my processes and why I decide to go with Sony systems nowadays. Flexibility, control, and adaptability, right? Now the flexibility of having a dual ISO camera that ranges up with FX6, you can safely go up to 12,800 ISO. How many people here have actually gone that far? Has anyone used it before? It's something that I would like to experiment with later, which is exactly why we're waiting for night to fall, right? 12,800 ISO is mind-blowing. It is a cheat. I actually spend more time cutting out light rather than adding light. You spend more time shaping it, like what Dix has done here, right? A lot of times in modern filmmaking, it's not about adding light, it's about subtracting. And that contributes to your speed and efficiency on set. Now, with the built-in variable NDs, right, you don't have to worry about shooting 12.8 because you can stop down individually. If you use other camera systems, like say the Panasonic, the ones, the Alexas, after a certain threshold, those built-in NDs jump exponentially. They'll go from an MP3 to an MP6 all of a sudden to a 1.2 and then a 2.4. So that's problematic. Sometimes you just want to cut it down and want to stop. Right? This camera doesn't necessitate that. You can stop down incremental NDs up to 1/128. So that is ultimate control without having to call an DC over. Right? It's all in your hands, and you can do it single-handed, which gets into control. Now the FX6 is primarily built for solo shooters, but with a proper rig, a cage, you can spec it out for an actual fully fledged film set. Adaptability, right? Now, one thing that's important to me here is future-proofing. For those of you who actually want to buy into the FX6 or the FX3, or if you got the Dodge, the FX9 and the incoming Bernardo, right? You want to know if the camera you purchase is going to be future-proof, right? What are the problems, the inherent problems with the FX6? The FX6 is only up until now 4K. right? Now that might be a deal breaker, especially if you're shooting commercials and you want a high resolution. So if you're shooting VFX, right? But within the Philippines, I promise you that 4K is okay for cinematic projection. Why? Our projectors currently max out at 2K, which is exactly why a lot of our films don't necessarily line up with foreign produced films of a 4K 6-play workflow, right? Inherently in the Philippines, we're stuck at a 2K workflow because of the output of our cinemas. Who knew that? Anybody know that? Jesus, this is a dead audience. Can I get a glass of water, please? Thank you. Next slide. Y'all are killing me, man. Seriously. Is anybody going to talk? Anybody going to throw me questions? So basically, all this stuff is stuff you get from the webpage, right? It's all the details. How many of you out here actually know what all this stuff means? Yes, of course you would. Anybody else? Anything confusing? Anything that you've ever needed clarification about? Right? Because I promise you, I'm old school. I came from the film days. I'm actually a lot older than I hope I look, but I've been there. I've been around for, this is my 17th year in the industry. So a lot of this stuff for me, when this new technology came out, thank you, was amazing. See, so this is the problem. Has anyone ever shot Ultra HD? Wow, you have. How did you like the look? It is, right? It's like what you see in appliance store specs. But for product shots, maybe documentaries, Ultra HD could work, right? 120 at 4K UHD, not ideal, amazing for its price point, and amazing still for the camera. I've already discussed variable NDs. S-Cinetone is only available in certain cameras, higher end Cinehalta cameras, so I actually prefer using S-Log 3, especially if you have control over the coloring. Anamorphic T-squeeze, again, modern cinema, everyone wants to shoot anamorphic. It's a new, fresh look, which really came out from the 70s, but anyway. Autofocus, this blew my mind. Again, coming from the old school, and always having reliance on my assistant camera, not just for pulling focus, but also for setting up and having another set of eyes on what we're doing helps. The autofocus for a solo shooter is amazing. Like I told you, the 16 to 35 is something we're going to play with. From 5 inches, pulling out as fast as you can, the autofocus remains. And accessible recording formats. That's pretty much just acquisition. I love the fact that it uses SD cards. Next. This is a little bit of a tip and trick, right? This is something that's been going around online. I've yet to test it just because I don't believe on the other side of the spectrum, right? So now we're discussing latitude. It's a published, I think, 15 stops, am I correct? Sony? 14 to 15 stops of latitude. Now, that may or may not be true in a real world situation, but a predominant theory that's going around online right now is that when you shoot, and I hope this chart illustrates it, when you shoot at a higher ISO threshold, you're actually allowing more detail into your highlights. Now, it's hard to see this because it's a dot matrix. I think you might be able to see it better on the screens, right? But if you actually look, it makes sense. Again, in terms of practical application, I'm not so sure yet. But when you shoot at a higher ISO, and you shoot into, say, the sky, apparently it allows for more highlight detail, right? Inversely, when you shoot at a lower ISO, your second base, it allows more shadow detail, right? Theoretically, because all you're doing is you're shifting your latitude. So if this is the entire spectrum of latitude base, from here to here, when you move to higher ISO, you're shifting it up. That's it. So theoretically, you will retain more highlight detail, right? Now that's the exact opposite of what I grew up learning, but it makes sense. Now inversely, if you shoot at a lower ISO at night, you'll get more shadow detail, right? But who the hell wants to shoot 800 at night? You gotta light more, it takes more time. You want to use that variable ISO. I'm done. Any questions? Seriously, I want to get to playing. Go ahead, please. Do we have a mic? Yeah? Doesn't ask you to get a mic. Who's going to volunteer, by the way, to be talents? Who wants to see the process up close? I think one thing that's going to be great, I've never had the pleasure of working with Dix on a set. So this is going to be a first for me, and I'm looking forward to it. Feedback. Who had a question? No one? Seriously, Vic, you got a question for me? Vic, no, you have a question? Anybody? Yes, sir.
So I noticed, like, when you bump up the ISO, the highlights go up and the shadows become like grainy. And I guess you balance the shadows out, but then the highlights are still like super sharp. So what do you do with that?
Sorry. When you bump up the ISO, meaning you're deviating from the base?
Yeah, like
what camera are you talking about?
Like let's say an FX3, like 12-800 ISO, like I noticed like the highlights become really sharp, and sometimes you kind of don't want that kind of highlights, but you gotta go up to 12-800. So what do you do about that?
You have to control the situation with light, right? I mean, like Dix explained, it's the basic exposure triangle, right? Switching to 12,800 ISO it's not a Hail Mary. It's not going to save you on set if you don't understand how to use the camera, right? So you still have to control your exposure values. You still have to understand how to light. You have to understand your contrast ratios, right? Because again, like you just said, your highlights will clip, your shadows will become milky because you've jumped up in ISO, right? So you'll have to stop down, increase your key light, right? Maybe flag off your subject, stuff like that. It saves you in a pinch, but it's not something that you should necessarily do 100% of the time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, it's the exposure triangle, basically. You have to control it. It's not something you just flick on and think everything's going to be okay, right? Like I said, it's a machine. You have to tell your tools how to work for you, or the tool controls you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Guy behind you had a question? Over there to your left.
What's your process for color grading with S-Log3? Do you occasionally do that? Do you like to do any color grading? What's your take on it?
Usually I don't have the benefit of running a lot of LUTs in film, primarily because producers don't want to pay a colorist over time to establish that. Right? Now, is it counterproductive? Very much so. In terms of color grading on S-Log3, it doesn't deviate very much from how we color grade anything else. I mean, you first control your contrast and then all of that. There's absolutely nothing different. One thing that I love about it is its flexibility across the different camera systems. Right? Now, the problem is, again, Cinematography, I think, gives you, it's not the perfect log format, but it is excellent in the hands of a good colorist. I'm sorry, what are your thoughts on that?
It was just more about asking if you had like a workflow or if you had some system that you use whenever you go on shoots, if there's something that you're looking out for when you're using like the FX9, FX6, or FX3
right.
with the S-Log3.
I think part of it, in terms of my personal process, is understanding exactly how I want the image to look, and that comes from experience. Understanding your contrast ratios, understanding the fundamentals of your exposure triangle will ensure you the latitude you need to control the image overall. So that comes from my personal process, again, because I'm a little old school. So I like to take it from there. I use my colorist as a Hail Mary sometimes because he gets me out the pin. But more so often than not, I like to trust in baking it into the camera first. Okay. Anybody else? JB? Nothing. Jordan? Nothing again. Anybody? I'm super good on time, right? You guys want to ask questions from Dix or Henry? No? Something that's really important is, for me personally, I've had the benefit of working with sound teams from different countries, right? And one thing that people don't pay a lot of attention to in the Philippines is the discipline of sound. Now, sound itself is extremely immersive. If you were in a movie theater and, say for example, the picture went soft, would you complain? No, right? You'd attribute it to human error, maybe just found its way into the edit, that's it, that's okay. But if the sound went off when you were sitting in a movie theater, what would you do? You would fucking ask for your money back, right? So it's something that we don't really pay a lot of attention to or give credit to, but it is a fundamental part of what we do. It is so immersive and adds a layer to our viewing experience that we often don't pay attention to. Right? I mean, what am I? Yes, Henry? Here we go. Here's the round table.
The thing with audio, kasi the difference between audio and video is you can correct video right away kasi it's visual. It's something that you see. But audio, you only notice audio pag may mali, like Direk Noel said. So if you find a movie or a film or anything and you don't have anything to say about audio, then that tells you that it was good mixing, it was good audio acquisition. Kasi ayun na nga, you didn't find anything wrong with it. So ayun, it's subtle eh. It's parang subconscious kasi sa inyo yung audio. So I liken it to, if you go to a Jeep, if you ride a Jeep and then you try to figure out the lighting inside the Jeep, you take it for granted, pero try to see where does the light come from? From in front of you, from behind, from the back. So audio is kind of like that. You have to, it takes conscious effort to understand the layers of audio. Kasi you take it in, like right now, you hear me, you hear the ambulance, you hear the air AC, it's all compressed for you. Pero you have to peel off the layers of audio and understand each bit of it. The thing with it is, it's easy to add, but you can't subtract from it pag na-record mo na siya. So you have to control all the noises before getting to post.
Isn't that what Pro Tools is for?
Nope, you don't fix in post. Don't fix in post. Okay, so it's going to cost you a lot of money.
But it is doable.
To a certain extent, yeah. We did VO using a cell phone because we couldn't send a team to Davao, and then they kind of corrected it with AI. But there's only so much that AI can do, and obviously you need a good editor. You need someone who knows what they're doing, and you don't really want to take that risk, that gamble. So ayun. So in the same way, it's all about trying to establish a good set, no, wherein you invest in each department. You give each department what they need, para you have a good final output.
I think just to piggyback on what Henry was saying, how many of you guys, I'm going to ask you a question again because I'm trying to involve you all. How many of you guys have had the pleasure of seeing Saving Private Ryan in a 5.1 Dolby theater? Thank you, man. Anybody else? It will blow your mind. The immersiveness of being in a war zone, just the opening scene when Tom Hanks lands on the beach in Normandy and just hearing the bullets fly behind you and from the right channel to the left channel. The mixing and the immersive experience is insane. Please, if you can, I really implore that you all watch this.
Sorry, I have something to add there. Parang, we did a reality show on an island. Tapos yung days off namin, so I was just in a cabin on stilts. So nag-enjoy lang ako ng waves, diba? Ang ingat pa ako. But then, it's nice practice kasi you kind of sit back and then you enjoy the waves. So parang ganun, that's how audio is. That's how immersive it can be, diba? So parang kasi audio isn't just left and right or mono. So once you understand that experience, it's kind of nice. For me kasi personally, when I was doing that docu about the weaving, there's this thing, parang it's very intimate kasi only I could hear it. But the way they cut the threads, the way they tie the threads and then roll it around yung kung saan nila iniikot, there's something about it. There's something about kung sino yung matanda na, sino yung very experienced, sino yung nagsisimula, who's using scissors, who's using a blade na ginawa lang nila doon. There's something about it na it's difficult to translate kasi with all the noise around you. Pero that's the challenge, is for you to acquire that, to capture that. It's kind of like getting that Kodak moment eh. Alam niyo yun, yung parang feeling mo, parang Korean novela na nagsuslow-mo na, tapos parang yun na yung end credits. There's something about that for audio as well. But it's difficult to explain kasi it's between me, the mic, and the headphones. Pero for me, that's what keeps me going, especially with docu, is I get to experience that. And the challenge of trying to capture that and share that with my audience. Ano ba? Ang punchline kasi, one of my favorite behind the scenes is from the movie Australia. They did a behind the scenes and they had one for audio. And one of their punchlines there was, see the world through your ears. It's a sonic world. Diba? I mean, you do it with visual also, but don't forget there's audio also. And you can see the world through your ears as well.
You know the best instances of post-production sound design for me was? How many of you have seen Eve? Please tell me you guys have seen Eve. Nobody? Michael Mansky? Yeah, Eve. Thank you. You understand that they gave every single person's gun a different sound. So even if they weren't on screen, you could tell who was firing. Right? So it's those little intricate details that add into the overall experience of your viewing pleasure. Right? I mean, who would have thought of something like that? It's a gun. A gun should be a gun, right? No. Each gun has an individual sound, which technically it should, but it's an individual, distinctive sound. So you know if Bobby De Niro is firing a weapon off screen. You know if Val Kilmer is, get in the vent! You know if he's over there.
They were, a friend of mine told me sa India, they were just recording, nature sounds. And then over the years, they could tell how it differed because of the population of like the birds and the wildlife, how it differed and how it was affecting the climate based off of the audio recordings over the years. It's kind of nice also kasi nga, it paints you a picture. Medyo addict.
That's not what we're here to talk about, no.
But ayun na nga, parang it paints you a picture. That's why I was telling you about how important atmospherics is as well. Sige, maghahanda na ako.
Anybody else? Or do you guys want like 15 minutes to take a smoke break before we get into practical? Yeah, sir. We got a mic?
Good afternoon, sir. Gusto ko lang po sana magpakwento kung paano kayo nag-start out sa film industry and paano...
No, yeah, I can hear you.
Saka kung paano kayo nag-start out as a cinematographer.
Okay, that's actually a really long story. Hope you got some time. I started out in the industry 2002. I first started out as art department in Singapore. I worked for MTV Asia, and I shot, I think, what was their first narrative series, which at the time was shot on a Canon XL1 with a PS Technic adapter so that we could use cinema lenses at the time. Looked like shit, looks super dated now. But at the time it blew my mind. I was art deck. So at the time, I mean, it was a good way to sort of watch the entire process, view the entire process. And it also taught me that I didn't want to become a glorified furniture mover my entire life. So I worked my way up to props master. So I started handling the weapons. I started building sets, just trying to pick up everything that was going on. I would always hang out with the G&E department. That's when I started working my way to becoming an electric, and then a swing, and eventually moved on to gripology and just learning how they started to rig everything. So after a certain time, I decided, okay, maybe this is what I want to do. I want to pursue this. Let's go to the US. I went to film school. At the time, I wanted to go in as an editor. That was really my dream. Kind of blew my mind the control that you have as an editor in the US. Like, I know a lot of you guys that have been to my other workshops have already heard this story. But why do you think in the US, they shoot a lot of singles. Non over the shoulders. You just have the character clean in frame. Why is that? No, it's not just because of spatial relationships. It's not because Filipinos as a culture need to understand where someone is, even though you've established they're in the same room. Directors will always look for that over the shoulder, right? I mean, if you're standing in line, there's someone literally breathing down your back, even if there's nobody else in line, right? That, I think, is a cultural thing. In the US, is it cultural? Possibly, right? Because it's the expansive space that everybody has. Possibly, but the real reason is so you have the freedom to edit out an actor entirely. You can cut a guy out of the movie if you wanted to. And that's why producers choose. And directors have learned to shoot singles. So after that, I went to the US. I wanted to be an editor. And I realized that I could not lock myself up in a room and not talk to anybody for 12 hours. So I moved into the camera department. I started as a clapper loader, and then I started loading film at the time. So I loaded 35mm film. It's the most stressful thing ever. Then I became a first AC. It was amazing the things that we would do on film sets as students. Because again, it blew my mind when I came back to the Philippines. Because of the way that our cast structure and our set structure is built. Right? In the US, I've seen grips walk up to a director and say, "Fuck you, you don't know what you're doing." Imagine doing that here. That would never happen in the Philippines. Right? But stuff like that, because a film set is equal. Right? The democratization of the film set ensures that everybody has a voice. And that's something that I want to instill in all of you. Right? As you grow up and as you mature as filmmakers, I hope that you all understand that you have a voice and your opinion matters. Right? Now that being said, I also hope that you grow up with empathy for the work. Right? The point of what I'm saying is I went through everything. I went through everything so that when I became a DP, I understood exactly what each and every process was. I didn't want to ask somebody to do something that I couldn't do myself. Right? And in that way, it ensured that if they told me they couldn't, I'd be like, bullshit, and then I'd go do it myself. Right? After that, after my experience as a clapper loader, I started DPing. I started DPing in film school. I worked on a couple of 35mm films. And then after film school, I was looking for a job. So this is gonna blow your minds. How many of you guys watch porn? Like y'all are lying if you tell me nobody watches porn. Are you serious? Y'all are lying. You do. Thank you very much. No. So my first job out of college was working as an AD for softcore porn at Vivid Films. Does anybody remember Vivid Films? The Tara Patrick, Jenna Jameson days. This is porn that your dads would whack off to, yeah. But yeah, those are the girls that I handle. But not full on hardcore. You don't need an AD for hardcore porn. You need an AD for softcore because it's a story, which, as we all know, has now grown up to become Viva Max. After that, I had to come back from the US. I had to come back from the US for a vacation. I came here and I submitted my reel for shits and giggles to the biggest movie studio at the time, which is Star Cinema. I like to think they still are, but opinions differ on that. And I never left. Never left. I've had consistent work. It's been a constant growth period for me. I'm always learning. It's such a paradigm shift coming from a US system and then coming back to the Philippines and seeing how we work. If you guys follow the LPS website, I actually talked about this briefly. And I discussed how, it was like night and day. And one thing that I'm so impressed about is in one generation, in the 17, 15 years that have gone since then, it's amazing how quickly we've caught up to work practices, technology, even the way we like and conduct ourselves on set. We are getting closer and closer to what the Americans can do. We're very, very close to what the Koreans can do. All we need is that extra push, discipline on our end, and the capability to learn and the willingness to use new products and utilize technology to our advantage. Right? At the time when I started off in the Philippines, a film camera was a film camera. At the time we had a 2C
which was an MOS camera. Now, that is an ancient camera from, God, when is it 2C from? It's from the 60s, right? So film cameras don't change. Film changes, right? But now we're in an age where every year a new camera comes out. Every year the technology changes exponentially. And it's up to us to constantly learn from that technology and use it to our advantage, right? Sony is at the cusp of that advancement in technology, which is why I really do honestly prefer their systems right now. Come back at me in 5 years, might change. Let's see what happens. Did that answer your question? It was a little long, I'm sorry.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And another follow-up. What was your turning point? When did you tell yourself, I want to be a DP?
God, you know, the funny thing is, like, when you're on set for 20 hours, I keep telling myself, I don't want to be a DP. I wish I stayed in law school, right? But the turning point was watching the process. I think for me, it was understanding. I like to think of myself as a very logical and scientific guy. So it's great that cinematography and being a director of photography allows you to mix the technology, science, and art all together, right? Because it's understanding the physics of how light and foot candles work. It's understanding what happens when you bounce something. It's the inverse square law of lighting, right? All of that. Those are all practical applications you can use. Math. I had no idea we would have to use this much fucking math in film, but you do. You do. Geometry will help you in film. I promise you that. Planning, making schematics, yes, you need math. But I digress, right? It's that beauty that allowed me, that the fact that when your technical skill is at a certain level, then all you do is art. It's how you utilize that technical skill to create art. When I realized that, that's when I knew I wanted to be a musician, right? And also, kind of like at the time, a lot of people have always asked me, why don't you want to be a director? I don't want that kind of responsibility. You know, I'd rather translate some guy's or woman's vision. I enjoy that back and forth. It's tough being the captain of the ship sometimes. Thank you. That's a very good question. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Finally. You want to operate the Ronin? Is that what you're going to tell me? Okay.
As a cinematographer like you, having experienced the film industry in the US, as well as the film industry here in the Philippines, what would you say is the biggest difference between the two industries?
Pay! Pay! What if I could pay? As a grip in the US, I would make enough to pay my rent, buy groceries, maybe just working 10 days out of the month. Now, you try doing that here as a grip, that's impossible. Unless you work for CMB, they pay pretty well. Like how I'm plugged in all in all. At the time, I think the major difference when I came back was the vision of the directors, right? When I came back in 2006, there was still a lot of the old guard, so they had their set way of doing things, and that prevented me from kind of bringing everything that I've learned from the US here in the Philippines. Now, it is, like I said, it's amazing how everything's caught up since then, right? And we're getting closer and closer and closer. Now, the only thing stopping us from achieving that is the vision of our directors, right? Which is why I implore all of you young bloods, you know, try new shit. Try new shit. Find your style. Do you know what I mean? Don't necessarily bite from the Koreans alone. Bite from the Koreans, bite from the Americans, bite from the Japanese, right? My challenge, something that I always ask a lot of filmmakers now, is what makes us Filipino? What is different? Like, Americans have their standard of filmmaking. Koreans have a fixed standard of filmmaking right now that we're all trying to copy, right? But that is their culture, right? One question I like to ask all of you is, what defines our culture as Filipinos, and how do we translate that to film? How do we translate that to our images without ending up as a cheap facsimile, right? There are no answers to that yet, but it's a question I'm asking all of you, right? What is our Filipino style? The constant over the shoulder? What is it? The bad comedy? The quotable quotes? You know, like, what's our next generation? What's our next step? Challenge. Did I answer your question? Thank you. Anybody else?
So
Alright, another
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Last question for this story. As a cinematographer, again, there's this ongoing debate with people saying that you don't need a good camera to make a good film. So, what is your stand on that?
I agree with that wholeheartedly because again, a camera is a tool, right? Some people on set can be tools too, but a camera is a tool. A camera is a machine. It is up to your technical knowledge in order to tell the machine what to do for you and how to eke out the maximum image you can with what you have, right? I mean, I'm sure we've all seen those videos online where they give a $4,000 camera to a non-professional photographer and a $40 camera to a professional photographer. You can see the difference in skill, right? It's about how you utilize it to its maximum advantage, right? Like one thing that's blowing my mind right now is the current trend that people are shooting 4x3, right? They're going back in time. We're going 20 years back in time because it's something new and fresh, which is the irony of it because when I was coming up, we were trying to get as far away from 4x3 as possible, right? Because we just wanted something new. We wanted to do that widescreen stuff, right? The irony is, full frame is fucking 4x3. It's just 4x3 multiplied by, I don't know, what, 500%? Right? So again, what that shows us is that technology is also cyclical, right? So it's about learning new technology, but also remembering what you've done in the past. Because time will come around where you get to use that again. When we shot Inconvenient Love, I was pulling tricks out of my hat that I learned in the 90s, right? But it blew the director's mind. It's like, what is this? This is the first time I've seen something like this. This is amazing. So never forget where you came from. But always keep one eye ahead. Thank you. Good question here. Anybody else? Should we take a 20-minute break? No one? All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was quick. We go outside. So again, what we need for the shoot is we're continuously setting up. We need a couple of people who are going to act as extras. We do have a talent. Who's willing? This way you actually be able to see the process up close. This is going to be Dix and I collaborating to pretty much, can we pull that up again, please? Can we pull up the animatic storyboard? Faster than a mosquito bite. So again, like Dix was saying, storyboard is not necessarily the Bible. We're going to try and find a better frame than this, although I really like the idea of the shot. So conceptually, pause it. Pause it. If you understand what's going to happen is we need to set a crowded street. And the moment he puts on the Sony headphones, the world disappears. Play please. Pretty much simple. It's just utilizing movement, camera movement, to try to fire an awesome shot. So there it is. It's pretty simple. But again, the purpose of it is to show how lighting, proper camera movement, proper camera work can actually elevate what it looks like kind of mid-location. All right, so again, we need volunteers. Already have a cam up? Yes, sir. Are you volunteering or as a talent or an operator? You're wearing a mask, so that I can't read your lips. What are you saying? Anything? All right. We need a couple more people to be talents, please. No shit. While you guys out there, you can ask Dix and I questions. I'm telling you, it's a good thing. We're going to be spouting some rodent knowledge too. No one? All right, come on, let's do it. As long as you're using G Masters or Sony lenses. It's amazing. Third-party app. Are we on that yet?
Yes, we need to.
So who's operating? Which one do we need?
People here, kunwari nasa ano tayo,
No, you're the meantime. See guys, let's have a group of participants here. And then 3, 2, 1 and lakad. And stop. Put in your headphones. Actually, kahit nakasling na sa'yo, okay lang siguro. Yan. Yan, sige. Alright, put on your headphones.
Should be like a belt.
Okay, anong lagay? Sige. I feel like mas swabe pa yung movement. So, galing na lang sa loob. Oh, yan.
No, why not
Alright.
sabit na lang sa bag, like outside the bag.
Oh, sige, pwede rin. Sabit sa bag. Any suggestions? Lakad! Yan. And tago! Oops, wait lang. Tapos, boom, there we go. And walking out. And
Can we do one tech rehearsal, please? Dix, is that okay with you? One full tech rehearsal that includes all talents and movement. Okay? So we're gonna call this out like we would an actual film set. Gab, I'll take over as de facto AD. Alright? I'll take over as de facto AD. Just the AD, the stand-in AD right now. Okay? Yung ano. So talent stand by. We good? You ready? You'll just be there in your mark, please. So talents, I will cue you before the actual roll.